Why are you here? What do you want to learn? Do you feel like you've joined the school? Is this okay for you? Tell me. I want to know.
I am here because I want to know how to beat the system. Science is so slow, it takes so long, and it's usually incredibly inaccurate along the process to understanding and elucidation of whatever topic it's observing. Whereas there are many subtle nuances to the science of life on many levels, and if we can tap into those, we have access to understanding, awareness, and insight that can be much faster and achieved at a much shorter time frame than science can provide, though I am very much a scientist in my orientation. So I look forward to hearing, discovering, and learning ways to interact that are more intuitive and more efficient than scientific observation.
I wish I had a bathtub.
I have a bathtub and I never use it.
I want it all. I don't care if you call yourself a teacher or a guru or a school or a class or leadership or the names aren't that important to me, but that's part of who I am. I don't care that much about titles. And I want the Hebrew alphabet. I want the tree of life. I want the masculine and feminine parts of our personality. I want to know how the Hebrew letters correlate with the major arcana, and I want to know, I want just more of what we've already talked about some, but I want more of that. I want to learn to connect all the pieces. I want to know more of the metaphors and your understanding of them related to the text, and that I want you to just teach the things you know, and I want to learn, and I'll fast forward if you're boring me. Oh, I'm Melissa, by the way. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Kelly. Thank you for what you've posted, and I want to ask, how do you feel like you're not beating the system? Can you give a practical example of that in your life? And Melissa, I hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for all your support and encouragement. I think it's interesting for me to see how hard it is for me to structure the teachings in a way that is, kind of ongoing versus students asking questions, like I've done in some of the classes you've attended. But it's good for me to structure it in such a way. So I'm happy for the opportunity, and I'll just dive into whatever feels right based on the current chain of events. So.
Hey everybody, this is Diane and Aerez. Really nice to be here in this group with you leading. So I want to reiterate, I want to just second the motion from Melissa about I would love to learn like maybe a weekly teaching, and it could be a short teaching or a long teaching, whatever, on the Hebrew letters as well. Like I really like that idea, and also how that relates to the major arcana. Like Melissa said, I totally feel like it'd be nice, and it'd be nice to have it as sort of sequentially. And I really liked sort of way back, not way back, but a little bit back, how you had showed us on the board, like your chalkboard, some of it. So I'm just putting a plug in for that, and I appreciate you starting a new method of teaching here in terms of using Marco Polo. So thank you. Glad to be here.
Just as about to say hello everyone, my dog peeks through the room. Look. What, Benji? Now he's gonna do his staring for a few minutes. Not quite yet. Okay. Hold on, he's distracting me. Okay. First of all, I want to welcome the new members. We have a few people join the group, I think 3 over the past week, and I can't remember exactly who came first and so on and so forth, but I know we have Amy now, and Isabella, we have someone from Australia, and Mary, you're here with us now, and Kelly, I think you joined before, but I love to have you here. It's great. And I also want to thank those who participated. Melissa and Kelly, thank you for the questions and the information. Diane as well. And thanks for repeating something that you've heard from someone else. It helps me to understand that there is more than one person, because sometimes I don't remember who asked what and when. And thank you, Audrey, for always being so on target. So, what are we going to do today? So first of all, I will speak about accent. I've been struggling with my accent, which one to speak. So today I'm just gonna let whatever comes out, and fuck it. Sometimes I will switch to English accent, sometimes, that's my goal. My goal is not to think about it. So I will practice today with you. And if it sounds weird at times, tough noogies. It's how I am in this moment. So, I feel a little self-conscious, but I'm sure as we get into it, I will קבל פלפל בתחת. Okay, so what are we going to do today? So actually, I had no idea what I'm going to speak about today. And it seems like Sundays are becoming the day that this channel will be broadcasting, but there's no declarations yet. But I felt I wanted to continue the law of equilibrium from last week. But the hornet's nest, nothing happened. It's just sitting there the way it is, and there is no update on the hornet's nest, so I couldn't build something around it. And this is the thing about practical metaphysics. I totally understand that someone says, hey, teach me tarot, hey, tell me about this, tell me about that. But the nature of practical metaphysics is that if it's not practical, that is, if it's not rooted in something concrete, in reality, then you can't teach it. It becomes too boring, too theoretical. You can teach the theoretical, but you have to teach it through some kind of a metaphor. And the metaphor is always life. Because the theory, when it comes to metaphysics, it's the antithesis. Everything reverses. If usually the theoretical is the practical, the law of physics, how matter is built, the element, the table of elements, direction, speed, things that are very concrete, that's always the theory. Right? And where is it represented? It's represented infinitely in the world as metaphoric representations of that theory. And that's the idea behind metaphysics. That yes, we can learn a pattern. We can learn how to beat the system. We'll understand what that means in a few minutes. But to understand it, we can only do it through either action or watching something that is concrete. Because if we just understand the system as a theoretical construct, we will have nothing to connect it to. And this information is elusive. It goes away. Oh, I understand, yeah, everything is two opposites. Everything is yin and yang. Then it goes. But it has to be a concrete example, something that is touching our hearts, because we connect it to our own reality and to the way that we live. And that's the idea behind practical metaphysics. So yes, I know that I owe some answers to people about things that they have asked me. But I'm like, okay, so someone asked me about dementia, how dementia works. But to say, okay, so here's dementia. Dementia is blah, blah. Yes, Want to know that? Go to YouTube. It's on the YouTube. But it's theoretical. I need concrete examples. So when Kelly, you come in the bathtub and saying, I want to know how to beat the system, that's a great metaphor. That's beautiful. Because it gives me the story. It doesn't just give me the theoretical question, but it gives me a story. There is a story here. There is something that you want that you're not getting. So let's dive into it. What does it mean to beat the system? First of all, what is the system? And why are we trying to beat it? So I assume in this particular context, Kelly is talking about two things. First of all, the concrete system of the way reality works. There's things that we can do, there's things that we want to do and cannot do, and there's things that we have to do but we don't want to do. There's a system. A system that we live together with. Without it, chaos. But there is, in what Kelly is saying, there's also the metaphysical system. How it works in the area that cannot be analyzed using mathematics. So yes, a particular individual is feeling angry, so breathe, because the system, the science tells us that the more we breathe, it's better. Or maybe you need to eat this, or eat less of that. But how do we navigate the world of the metaphysical, the world of the emotional? How do we get everything we ever wanted, even in that realm? Now, why do we say beat the system? It's an interesting choice of word, Kelly. And I appreciate you for coming and speaking it. Because there is something inherent there. Now, the law of equilibrium tells us, which we talked about last week, that everything in the metaphysical is self-originating and always comes back to itself. So if you're beating something, something is beating you. That is it. That's one of the Hebrew laws of metaphysics. There are many laws of metaphysics in Hebrew. And in this forum, we will study them, one at a time. So the law of equilibrium tells us that if we're beating something, we're being beaten. Now, nobody wants to be beaten at something. So it's the choice of word that is important, because it's the words that create reality. If you think you need to beat the system to get what you want, then maybe we need to reevaluate how the system works. And so it's hard for me to tell you how to beat the system, because I think the system is unbeatable. But I can tell you what is the system in the metaphysical. Whether you choose to beat it or just to play with it is up to you. So, let's begin. So today we're in my studio, in my study. How about I give you a little introduction to my study? Okay. So, Kelly, I think in order to answer you, I must ask a very simple question. What is moving us towards doing something? What is the power, what is the energy that is causing us to move, to want something? Our will. What is moving our will? What is focusing our will? Hebrew metaphysics tell us that what focuses our will is our desire. Now, what's the difference between will and desire? Well, they're not the same thing. I can sit on the couch and I can want a sandwich, and yet I'm not going to have the desire. I have a desire for sandwich, but I'm not going to have the will to go get it from the fridge. Two different things. Will in Hebrew metaphysics is considered the masculine essence, the masculine force. And the desire is the feminine essence of man. And so there's always a desire, there's always something that we want, something that's not quite right, that's not quite we have to beat the system to get it. Okay? Because the system is fucked up. Oh, if I was only beautiful, then I wouldn't have this problem. Or, oh, if I only had money. Or if I only had help, people to help me do what I need to do. What is this thing? What is this thing that we're looking for? Hagshama Atzmit. In English, self-realization. So, what is the purpose of the process? Why are we studying Hebrew metaphysics? What's the point? It's practical metaphysics. There's a practicality to it. What is the practicality? The practicality is self-realization. Now that is an abstract term. Much better in English, with an English accent. Self-realization. What is self-realization? Well, let's think of the word realize. We're being realized. I'm suddenly become self-conscious that the camera is not getting me, so I'm going to have to do a quick test. Can you see anything? Barely. This is what we have right now. So, self-realization. Now, maybe I can zoom in a little bit. And zoom you guys in. Because there's a whole area I see that you're not getting. How's that? A little better. The thing is that I can't flick the camera, because if I flip the camera, you're going to see it in reverse, because the selfie camera is, and so I become super self-conscious because I'm not seeing myself. The seeing myself allows me to focus my thought on what I see, and therefore I can tap into that place, but without seeing it, it's very hard for me. And so I'll have to get used to it. It's just the way it is. Because I want you to see the board. I want you to see the entire board, which you do. Okay, great. So, what's the idea? Self-realization. What is self-realization? We want to realize our potential. Realization is a realization of potential. We all have a particular potential. And if we don't realize it, we feel like, it's very masculine. It's a very masculine trait. But I know many women feel this way. I'm married to one. And she talks about it. She always talks about that drive. It's one of the things that inspires me about Diane the most. That she never lets it go. She's like, no, there's more that I can give. It's that knowing, and that drives you forward, and that's also an Achilles heel, right? Because then it's like, oh my God, I so want to. Now there's desire, right? Because the will is there, but when we can't quite get it, when something is missing, then the desire grows and grows and grows. And it can be frustrating. And so the East, they tell us, let go of the desire. Desire is not good. But in the West, in Hebrew metaphysics, in occultism, in alchemy, the center idea is that it's the desire. I'm going to make it red. The desire, the feminine essence, must be satisfied. And the Western traditions will tell you that this is the fastest way to self-realization. Because if you're doing it this way, then for sure you're going to learn. You're going to learn the next step. Why? Because your desire can be either a false desire or a true desire. A false desire that is essentially coming from the place of the ego, the personality, to satisfy the need to be greater, to have more money or whatnot. And it's still your next step. Western philosophy tells us that desire is your northern stars. It is your northern star. So if you follow it, you will sure get to what you need to get. And so what is on the other side? The other side, I don't know why I'm doing green and I don't know why desire felt like a red one. But it gets tricky when we do colors because the colors actually mean something. So please do not... I'm going to be lazy here. Will and desire. We'll talk about color some other time. But will is masculine, desire is feminine. We feel it in sexuality. Men would do crazy things for sex. The will is greater in sexuality, or the lack of will is greater in sexuality. Both the attraction and the repulsion are at their highest in sexuality. There is no studying metaphysics without studying sexuality. Metaphysics is the science of sexuality. The science of sexuality. What's the idea? There's an idea behind all this. So how do we beat the system? There is a language that we do not speak that is yet still there. And if we learn how to see it, if we learn how the system works, we can actually look at what's happening around us with a different set of eyes, with a different set of understanding, a different understanding of what is actually happening. Now I'll give example to what I mean. We meet a person and we want to work with that person. And yet, we so try to make it happen, but it just doesn't work. Maybe we want him to meet him. Maybe it's somebody who's doing irrigation for us, or a plumber or something. And we want him to meet at the new house that we're building or doing. And they can never quite be booked into a solid hour or in a day. They're always flowy. And we need it, they're not in our vibe. Why is that? What's the science of that? So when we say here, the scientific method has, Kelly, you said it. You said intuition. What is intuition? Let's go back to Hebrew wisdom. So when we open a dictionary, we try to understand what intuition means. There is no such a word in Hebrew for intuition. It's translated, and I kid you not, Ruach HaKodesh. The Holy Spirit. So intuition in Hebrew is the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. It's a place from within that comes in, that gives us information, that animates us, that yet is not controlled by our minds. Our mind is receptive to it. Okay? It comes to us from within. It's intuition. It's like there's two types of thoughts. There's thoughts that we think, that we guide. Oh, if I want to cook Greek salad this afternoon, I better go to the store and get lettuce. And do we have olives? It's a thought that I'm leading in my own head. But it's a guided thought. It's guided by my will. But then there's the thought, ooh, I just saw chicken wings, or thought of chicken wings, or could smell chicken wings, or some kind of a mental experience that happened. It's not physical. There's no chicken wings here. But I just thought of it, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I want chicken wings. Desire. Where's that thought came from? Or maybe, ooh, I don't want chicken wings. Right? Desire to get away from something. Where's it coming from? Now, we think that our mind is like crazy, fucking busy, and all these thoughts every thought means something. Because there's two types of thought. Thoughts that our conscious mind generates, that's the thought I'm controlling, and the thoughts that the subconscious mind generates. And the subconscious mind, Chava, Eve, versus Adam, the conscious mind, Chava knows exactly what she's doing. Every subconscious thought is controlled by her. And so that's intuition. And so the idea is that there's things that science simply cannot deal with. Let's talk about that for a second. Science has disappointed us. That is the reality. Science allows me to do this. It is amazing that I can broadcast to people in Australia. She could be, Isabella could be, you could be watching now and see me live and interact. And I have all my cameras and my studio and cell phones that can film me for 12 hours straight. Not Apple, obviously. Technology is amazing. Science is amazing. Academia gets an A when it comes to the exploration of the brain. We can touch something here and it's like bloop, 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 bloop. This is the frontal cortex, this is the schmattal cortex, gets an A. At least for effort, if not for anything. But he gets an F in the exploration of the mind. Part of it because academia cannot research with altering substances. Which means it goes back to funding. But that's politics. I will not go into politics yet. Everything is polarized. We'll talk about that too. We have to talk about everything, about all the topics that we don't talk about. Because they are, this is the point. What we already understand, we know that science can give us. It's what we don't understand that science cannot give us. And so we need to understand what science cannot give us. Did I repeat myself 3 times and it didn't make sense? I was distracted by a thought. See what happens? Okay, so let's go back. Where is science failing? The scientific method is based on a 300-year-old tradition. There's 5 steps. Observation, measurement, You can't measure consciousness. It is an impossibility. There are things that cannot be measured. Can you measure the love you have for a child? Can you measure the level of frustration that you have? Yeah, sure, you can give a relative measurement. You say, listen, on a 1 to 10, 1 that I'm very comfortable with you, and on 10 that I'm about to smack you, I'm a 7 right now, so tone it down. You can do that. But can you quantify it? You cannot. And so we are literally limiting ourselves as a society, as an intellectual society, in the research of that which is not quantifiable. Because academia owns the voice of the scientific findings. If you want to publish something today and you're an independent researcher, you write a book. But if you don't have the doctor, the PhD, obviously I'm experiencing it, right? But it's okay, because I can study it outside of academia. How? How do we study metaphysics without the scientific method? How? How is it possible to come up with a pattern, a mechanism to that which cannot be touched, even though that we can't measure it? The answer is in the law of metaphysics. There are laws to the metaphysical world just as unbreakable and just as firm as the laws of physics. But their reflection in nature is never accurate. If physics is the science of consistent accuracy, metaphysics is the science of inconsistent accuracy. No, it's the opposite. Consistent inaccuracy. Fuck. I try to say it right every time and I always fuck up. But the idea is that consistently there will be an inaccuracy. Yeah, consistent inaccuracy. Inaccurate, consistent. Fuck. It's too complicated. You understand? Let's explain. Nothing in this nature is perfect. You can't have anything in nature that is perfect. Because what is perfect? You go to a field of poppies, okay? And you see a field of poppies, and it's beautiful. the law of metaphysics, the law of physics tell us that they will, the law of physics will tell us that they are growing in a particular time of year, that the average size is this and that, and so on and so forth. But the law of metaphysics tell us that in this particular field of poppies, there are tons of poppies that are damaged, missing a petal, burned by the sun, stepped upon by an animal, genetically mutated in some form, shape or another. Metaphysics is the science of inaccuracy. Patterns in the macro. So naturally, every pattern is showing itself like what's called standard distribution. Let's see what that looks like. Standard distribution tells us, let's switch to this form. Standard distribution looks like this. Okay? So you have two sides, a masculine and a feminine. You start in one point and it repeats itself. It's a sine wave. Now what does it mean? Just about here, most people are mentally typical. So for example, in the field of poppies, most poppies look like poppies, like normal poppies. There's fixed number in standard deviation, you can Wikipedia it. 30% on this side, approximately, 30% on this side. There is another 15% on each side that is, the more masculine or feminine, that is more this way or that way, okay? 15%. And then a really small percent of the population, right here, is it's usually about 5%. That there is a completely different experience. Okay? It's a little messy, but you get the point. And so it's true in every system. It's true when it comes to the human psyche. It's true when it comes to the field of poppies. It's true when it comes to the people you're going to be working with on your house project. It's true everywhere. And so what we're doing with Hebrew metaphysics is we're studying the structure of the psyche in order to allow us to understand the standard distribution of the human experience, and so that we can then to say, oh, this person is probably a little like this, and with people that are a little like that, I'm usually getting annoyed. How do I work with that? We're all different. Everybody's subjective perspective is correct. Okay? And that's the idea. That's what we're learning. So, why do we care about standard distribution? Because it tells us that the process is not going to be yes, no, like science. What do I mean? What I mean is that in science, the results are accurate. They're very specific. We know what we're getting, we know what we're trying to achieve, and we know what we're getting. But in metaphysics, it's not like that. Just when we think we find a system, it messes up on us. Why? Because the standard distribution assures us that for every thesis there is an antithesis, the antithesis. And so for everything that we see in a particular way, we're going to find it in another way that's going to prove the opposite. It's always like that. And so we have to do it through experience. It's an art, not a science. The understanding of the structural mechanism of the map is in its own accord important. But we have to understand it through experience. And so, what experience do we use? So let's use the experience of the person who wants to beat the system. Let's go back to our story. Something is missing. If there's nothing was missing, there would be no system to beat. So how do we know what's missing? Hebrew metaphysics is very practical. It tells us what to look for. It tells us that there are 7 opposites, switches, like an on and off switch, that they are either on or off in our lives. And based on this list of 7 switches, we can ask ourselves, what is on and what is off? And then we can direct the will towards our object of desire, because now we know where it is. So let's look at these 7 different dichotomies that are governing our state of consciousness. Those of you who studied a little bit of Hebrew before know that there are 22 letters. Okay? So it goes like this. In fact, I will show you. Let's erase this a little bit. I always think I'm going to start somewhere else, and then I can tell I'm messing it up. So it's going to take me a little while to... So the Hebrew language is 22 letters. So we have 3 letters that are called the mother letters. They're very special letters. Right here. And as you can see, I'm denoting them by a horizontal red line. Then there is 7 double letters and 12 simple letters. So we'll write it down. There's 3 mother letters, 7 double letters, and 12 simple letters. Let's see them. You can see them right here. The 3 red letters are the 3 mother letters. The 7 double letters are the 7, are the 7 double letters. The 7 yellow letters are the 7 double letters, and then the 12 simple letters are the blue one. So, why is that important? Because the 7 double letters signify some kind of opposites, a pair of dichotomies, 7 pairs of dichotomies that really define the way we live. And as you can see here, I've created sort of like this illusion of a switch. So here's an example for the 7 dichotomies, and let's understand what they are. So, the first one is wisdom versus ignorance. So I'm going to write them down in English as we look at them in Hebrew. So that would be wisdom versus ignorance. So a man can be smart, have intellect, have wisdom. It doesn't have to be intellectual, it could be experiential wisdom. Or it can be ignorant. When we're young, we're all ignorant in experiential wisdom. Experiential wisdom only comes in age. So, is it on or off? For each and every one of us, the answer will be different, and it's subjective. Compared to what? But it's something that we feel. Because remember, all these are dichotomies that if one of them is off, then we're not happy. Then we want to beat the system. We want to get it somehow. Here's the other one, the next one. So this is the letter Bet. Wisdom versus ignorance. The letter Gimel, it's the 3rd letter of the alphabet, the second simple letter, the second double letter, is richness versus poorness, right? So in here we're talking about, let's see, rich versus poor. Now what is rich versus poor? In every one of these, you can have they have 2 sides to them. They have the side to them that is more metaphoric, metaphysical, and the side that is more concrete. So in ignorance and wisdom, maybe it's, maybe you're teaching, maybe you have something to say, you have wisdom that you're sharing with the world. And if it's internal, it's like the inner wisdom, right? Or like we said before, the wisdom that is more experiential versus the wisdom that is a degree or a book or something that you do in the world that you teach. In richness, it's the same. You could be rich with love, rich internally, rich in a great life and an interesting life, but there is definitely the connotation here also of the physical. So if you're always poor, some people just can't quite get the money thing down. And so this switch for a person like that would be off. So let's say it's just a particular individual. These are two just randomly chosen, some of them randomly, some of them not, but it denotes a particular individual who, so let's stick to, I'm going to keep these out, that's going to be yours to fill out. In order to find your desire, you're going to fill out your template. And so let's go to the third one. So in this particular individual is a smart individual, produces something, some kind of a wisdom to the world. There is richness, both physically in money. And it's like I'm speaking with the wrong language all the time today. I feel very self-conscious and I can't find my words. It's like I want to speak Hebrew, but my mind knows that maybe in English I'll be more articulate. It drives me nuts. Let me restart the video. The third one, seed versus desert, I guess would be the right translation. I'm filming? Yes. Seed means that you have an offspring in the world. And again, it could be physical, an actual offspring, a son, a daughter. Or desert. Your seed has not grown anything, but it can also mean something that you produce, maybe a book, maybe something to the world that is your child, that is your offspring. So that's this one. Write it down. Seed versus, I'm just going to call it desolate, out of the lack of a better translation. Life or death is the next one. And here we're talking about, well, you got to be alive, right? But are you alive? Like in Christianity, the quick and the dead. The quick are those who are really awakened, and the dead are those who are not. And of course, in practicality too, you can, you can go to work and live your life, but something inside of you is dead. You're not really motivated by something that propels you. Your willpower is unfocused. And so you're really feeling like a zombie, you're dead. And in this particular example, this individual has wisdom, has money, has seed in the world created, but he feels dead. And so let's write that down. This is life versus death. And I'll focus on the English in a minute. Government versus governing versus very hard to translate to English. Let's say submission. Essentially, you're either working for someone or you're the governing one. And so again, that can be in reality that you're the kind of person who's always working for someone else and dependent on that check from someone else. And then when you lose your job, you're like, again, I need to go. And so you're enslaved in a particular way. In Hebrew, it's memshala and avdut, means government and slavery. So in the old world, you were either working for someone or you're the one who had people working for you. So yeah, it has to do with money. But what this one talks about is more from a governing perspective. So you as an individual, are you making a change in the world? Right? Are you impacting the world as a leader? Now that has responsibility. When you're governing, you actually have to govern. But in order to move a society in a particular direction, you have to be here and not here. Here is you're depending on the one who was elected to govern in order to do the job. Now, in the old days, it used to be that the people who were elected to govern were automatically the people who also have richness and so on and so forth. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because people who have a business know what it takes to have a business. People who never had a business do not understand what it entails. People who have never failed in running a business don't understand what it entails to fail. Like it takes to go through the experience to self-realize. So when you get to that level, now in today's day and age, unfortunately, the people who are governing are not always the people who are qualified to it through the other pieces. Okay? And so there's a particular progression here. There's a reason why wisdom comes first. We cannot do anything in the world without developing the intellect in some way, shape, or form to have some kind of wisdom, either experiential or intellectual. Then we get rich. Rich in the heart when we have experiential wisdom, rich in the physicality of it, when we have some kind of an intellectual wisdom that brought us this money, and then we can produce a seed. If we bring children to the world but we cannot give them anything, we cannot feed them, they'll die. And so one after the other, life. Then we feel alive, right? We have a reason, we have a purpose. What's the next step? Governing. Okay? Are we the type of person who has enough influence that is actualizing our potential, that is realizing our potential? If we have all these wisdom and money and seed, seed in the world, or life, a particular, like we feel like we're alive. Maybe we feel alive, but we don't have the seed. Okay? In whatever it means to us. A company is also a seed, a business. But maybe we need both. Maybe we need a child. Governance, but maybe what we want to do is we want to go to the next level. We want to have more influence. And that leads us to the next one. Peace versus war. So let's write the previous one. We haven't wrote it down. I keep forgetting that I can look in the mirror and see. But now that I'm remembering, that's good. So life, death. We have governing, which is a particular level of responsibility, a particular level of self-realization. Some people want to do that. And this one's be governed. Ideally, we all want to govern ourselves in all aspects. Beat the system, want to be able to do what we want to do when we want to do it, and not being governed by rules that don't apply to us, that we don't want them to apply to us. But we have to live according to the way everybody lives. So, when we govern, we can change things. Peace and war. What does that mean? Some people are always in war. Always. They're always fighting someone. They always, things are always hard. Look at Donald Trump. He's not living in peace. Yeah, he's governing, but he's living in peace. There's always somebody who's after him or not, and Michael Cohen and Schmoen, and the liberals are after him, or maybe now the conservatives. We have very little peace in politics. Governing in peace. We haven't quite made that leap in society. Rarely people do. The hardest is to get them all, right? Chen and kiul, the next one, the last one, is beauty and ugliness. That one also is a very, very important one, very basic one, primal one. If we're not happy with the way we look, I gotta get like a carpet here or something. It's killing my knees. If we're not happy about the way we look, deep down inside, we want to be different. That means we don't love ourselves, right? Because when we learn to love ourselves, suddenly everything that we see in the mirror becomes appealing to us, because we know the scars, we know the inners, the outers, we know what's happening. We've learned to love ourselves. So this is right there is self-love. Because when we see ourselves in a positive light, we're beautiful to other people. It's just the way it is. You don't have to, hold on, my knees. We all know that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. It's just the way it is. I used to look in the mirror and think, oh, I'm so ugly. One day I remember I was in Israel and I felt good about myself that day. And this girl was just, I could have sworn she was hitting on me. I never had a girl hit on me before. Or at least never knew that a girl was hitting on me. And I realized, it just hit me in that moment, that it's the way you carry yourself. And if you think that you look good to some people, it's all subjective anyway, right? But then I started realizing, what things I'm actually unhappy about. Wonder what will happen if I film both at once. Let's overlap them a little bit, see what happens. Fuck with the process a little bit. Can we crush the system by running two at once? I'm running both of these at once now. This is very interesting. Okay, I'm going to stop fucking up. Can we crush the system by running two at once? I'm running both of these at once now. This is very interesting. Okay, I'm going to stop fucking up. But the idea is that if you think you're attractive, then you're suddenly attractive. Because that's how you hold yourself. That's what you project out. What we're projecting outward is nothing but essentially a reflection of who we are. And that's one of the most basic principles in Hebrew metaphysics. The idea is that the reality that we think we're looking at is actually the backside of the subconscious. Because it's the subconscious, Eve, Chava, who is broadcasting reality to the conscious mind. You cannot have a perception of reality without being conscious of it. When you're unconscious, there is no reality. You fall asleep every night. Reality is gone. Sometimes you wake up from a dream, it takes you a few minutes to realize which one is reality, which one's not. And so reality is subjective. It's subjective to the conscious mind. It always goes through the filter of the conscious mind. Now, let's connect this whole one big mess. So we spoke about 7 double letters and the 7 dichotomies of life that we have to look at and ask ourselves, which one do I not have? Ignorance and wisdom. What's the switch? Is it on or off for me? Poorness versus richness. Do I need more money? Yes or no? Am I doing everything I want to do? Do I have enough money to do what I want to do? And do I feel rich inside? Do I have a seed in the world, either physically as a child or, as a creation of sort? Or am I desolate, a desolate desert who did not produce? Do I feel alive or am I dead from inside? Am I always being governed? Am I governing my own life? It's okay if we work for someone else as long as we're governing our own life. We're the one deciding. I have a friend who has been an inspiration to us all in the group of friends, who is quitting a job that is not conducive with her lifestyle. Are we at peace with the world, with the people around us, both individually, within relationship, collectively, as a person, and as a nation? Who are we at war with, if at all? And how do we reach the state of peace? There is no peace inside if there's no peace outside. And then what about beauty and ugliness? Do we see ourselves in the eye of the self? Do we think that we're beautiful? Or do we not? And so, these are the 12 double letters. Whoops! Night vision. What is all this? Pop art. Oh, look at that. It's a lot more lit, but a lot less clear. Let's play with it a little bit. So, why am I telling you all this? Let's jump to tarot, and you'll understand how it all connects. Hebrew metaphysics tell us that there is a map. You want to beat the system? No problem. Study the maps of metaphysics. The map of metaphysics tell us that we are a reflection of the way our conscious mind is. And there's a map that we can learn, a system of logic to understand how our body reflects our mind. So essentially the process is that we have to find the metaphor in our lives for where there is something in the map that doesn't quite flow right. Now let's look at the map. It has a name. It's called the Tree of Life. And here it is. Whoop. So what's the deal with the Tree of Life? The Tree of Life is this diagram right here. Now you can see that there are 12 diagonal blue lines. There are 7 vertical yellow lines. And there are 3 red horizontal lines. And the Tree of Life has 10 spheres, actually 11, but this one and this one never count at the same time, either this one or this one. And so really 10 spheres that tell us something. And we're going to dive into this map in the future. But what's the idea? The idea is that if something in the 7 dichotomies, am I recording? Yes. If something in the 7 dichotomies is missing, that means that one of these is blocked, or a few of these are blocked in a particular level. And the idea, metaphorically, from a theological and esoteric perspective, is that the energy goes into the top of the head. Eastern methodologies tell us that too. And there's an energy that comes from the bottom, and they meet at the base of the coccyx. In the Eastern methodology, it's called Kundalini energy. And the idea is that we have to raise it to the pineal gland, which is right here. As you can see, this is like a person. The 2 sides of the head, the pineal glands, the 2 hands, the 2 thighs. Boom, sexuality, right? So there's a particular structure, and this is like the body of a human being. And the idea is that these 12 lines symbolize something, and that these yellow lines symbolize something, and that the red lines symbolize something. Now I colored them. The colors don't really mean anything in theology. This is completely Aerez addition. And I probably chose colors that I should have chose something else, but I'm not visual. So I did that only to indicate the relationship between these lines and the Hebrew letters, and the zodiac signs, and tarot. And we'll talk about tarot in a minute. But what's the idea? We said we have 3 mother letters. Here are the 3 mother letters. Emesh, Aleph, Mem, Shin. We have 7 double letters in Hebrew. Beged, Kaparat. And we have 12 simple letters. So the 3 mother letters indicate these horizontal lines. They're the 3 elements in the Hebrew wisdom. In the Hebrew wisdom, there's only 3 elements, not 4. Because the idea is that earth is an amalgamation of water, fire, and air. We as humans can melt anything we want. It's no longer earth. It becomes liquid. It becomes water. We can separate it to water and other things, right? And so only 3 elements that are creating earth. This is our life. This is our kingdom. Malchut means kingdom. This is our kingdom. We create our own kingdom. Everything below here is our lives. And so these 3 are the elements. The double ones we already start talking about. We said there's 7 dichotomies that essentially dictate what quality our life would be. Are we off? Are we on? Are we alive? Are we not? Are we poor? So on and so forth. And each one is represented by something, by one of these lines. And then we have the 12 simple letters. And the 12 simple letters are essentially these, what's called in Kabbalah, the abundance pipes. The channels of energy that we must open in order to let everything flow. Now in the East, they're going to tell you do yoga. And if you're going to do yoga, you're going to open the nadis and so on and so forth. But that's very literal. That's doing it through the body. But in the metaphysical, it means something else. Each one of these 12 are essentially an extreme state of consciousness of sort. What does it mean when I say a state of consciousness? Let's go to the zodiac. As you can see, there are 3 invisible planets that are matching the 3 mother letters. There are 7 visible planets in our solar system that match the 7 double letters. And there are 12 zodiac signs that match the 12 simple letters. all Western traditions, astrology is in the West, that is, astrology is both shared between the East and the West. Because it's a tradition, it doesn't matter. All these traditions talk about the exact same truth. Tree of Life just happened to be a different view of it that encapsulates and includes a few. And so you have the zodiac sign. Now what does it mean, these blue things? Well, let's start from the dichotomies. The elemental are the three planets that are not visible. The dichotomies are essentially symbolized by the impact of these celestial bodies in our solar system on who we are. And they're always a metaphor. And so they're impacting us in a particular way, and our personality has been formed to reflect them. Okay? And so we must navigate these cosmic powers in order to give ourselves what we want. The switch that is off, to turn it on. Okay, those who understand, who studied astrology and speak the language of astrology know what I mean. There's these cosmic powers that are always at play. Like Mars, for example, is war. And so if you don't have peace in your life, you have too much Mars. Right? So these are the 7 visible planets. And don't ask me to tell you which one's which. I'm not very good with astrology partly because I can't remember the symbols. So understanding how our mind works is very helpful. And that's a topic for another time. So what are the 12 zodiac signs? The 12 zodiac signs are extreme states of consciousness that allow us to experience a remote edge of ourselves. There is a way to draw a sphere with 12 edges, like a star of 12 edges, 3-dimensional. And what happens really, like we're trying to reach that full sphere. We're all a sphere, a planet, a whole planet. And so these 12 states of consciousness representing the edges of our conscious experience. Right? Now, what do I mean? I'll get to tarot in a second. There's a great book about astrology called The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. And what he does a great job of explaining how each one of the zodiac signs is essentially an extreme state of consciousness. I'll give you an example. He gives a great example of Scorpio. So I'm a Scorpio. I was born on November 13th. And so he says, a Scorpio's extreme state of consciousness is when you're lying in the desert. It's super fucking hot, 120 degrees in the Mojave Desert. And the sun is right smack on you, middle of the sky, threatening to melt your fillings. And yet you do not move, because you have a black scorpion on your chest. Now any wrong movement, that black one is like, shove! You're gone. So you have to focus. And you focus your entire mental attention on that psychological battle between you and that animal. That is the state of consciousness of a Scorpio. Now, I strive to be able to be that focus. And yet, when we're at war, another great example he gives is Aerez. Aerez is a state of consciousness that is the fighter. You're in the corner, you're with a knife, you're protecting somebody you love, or maybe yourself, and there is a beast just in front of you, this wolf, like teeth are all out, and about to jump, and you're just screaming, ah, and you're jumping first. That's the state of consciousness of an Aerez. Extreme states of consciousness, we don't necessarily get to them on a regular basis, but they're there. And so what does that have to do with tarot? What does that have to do with the Hebrew letters? We're talking about these 12 lines that are the 12 lines that through which we filter reality. And as long as we have not embodied that extreme state of consciousness, each and every one of these 12, then we have not fully explored ourselves and have the ability to actualize ourselves, to self-realize ourselves in our full capacity. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go to the desert and put a Scorpio on my chest, but it means that that as a Scorpio, especially, I have to focus my attention. Now the idea is, what is a sun sign? A sun sign is when we were born. It indicates the particular patterns that my state of consciousness will fall into a particular groove, and it also symbolizes the specific state of consciousness that I must fully embody in order to fully be me. Present, which obviously is very hard for me to do, as you've seen today. So, that's the idea. Now let's go back to tarot. Now tarot gives us a slightly different story. So, how do we match the tarot with the Hebrew letters and with the zodiac sign? Now each and every one of them correlate, I can assure you, to a Hebrew letter. In fact, the Hebrew letters here are not organized by the alphabet. This is called the tarot tableau. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right. I think it's a word in French. But the letters in the Hebrew alphabet correspond by the order of these cards. So this is Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Tzadik, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Taf. So the order is slightly different, but it's actually the order of the letters. So what is tarot? Tarot is a different way to depict the wisdom behind the Hebrew letters. It's a pictorial way. Now, these are also pictorial. There's a reason why each and every one of them is shaped the same way. But these, the tarot, as a tradition, and notice that there's so many different tarot cards. As a tradition, tarot is essentially a system of wisdom originating in Egypt. That's the first place it's been found. If you want to see the original tarot cards, buy a book called The Raw Material by Don Elkins, Carlo Ruckert, and Jim McCarty. And you see in book number 4 of The Law of One, The Raw Material, you'll see pictures of these ancient tarots as were found from Egypt originally. Okay? They were black and white, by the way. But it doesn't matter. I'm using the Rider-Waite Tarot deck because it's the most accurate one to match the traditions of occultism. And the traditions that were kept on occultism are the most direct reflection of the Hebrew wisdom. And that's why I'm using the Rider-Waite Tarot. If anybody is interested in this particular knowledge, a book by Daphne Moore called The Rabbi's Tarot will tell you exactly for each and every of the tarot cards what it symbolizes from a Christian perspective, a Christian Judaic perspective. Very interesting book. So 3 books we already recommended today. There's a lot of good stuff out there. So let's look at tarot a little more closely. So we said before that in the Hebrew alphabet, when we look at the Hebrew alphabet, we essentially divide it into 3, 7, and 12. The 3 mother letters, the 3 double letters, and the 12 simple ones. And they all mean something. Okay? But in tarot, the division is slightly different. Look at it. We're talking dividing 22 into 1, 7, 7, and 7. Now what does that mean? Why 7, 7, and 7? So the top one is called the Fool. The Fool is you. That's you. That's your state of consciousness that is changing at any given time. Let me get something to hold this so I don't have to tremble. I can just point. So, the tarot. You have the Fool. The Fool is you. That's your state of consciousness. Now, it could symbolize anything from a newborn baby all the way to the enlightened man. But it is you that is receptive to all the laws of consciousness and the way your mind is developed in order to do what you want. Now, what can you do with it? So the first 7 in the series, which means the second letter to the 8th letter, are symbolizing the pieces, the various components, it is the word I'm looking for, of your consciousness. So for example, I'm not going to go into them right now, but the high priestess symbolizes super consciousness, which is Mother Nature, right? It's called the objective subconscious in occultism, because it's the consciousness that connects us all. The Empress, for example, is your individual subconscious. The Emperor is your conscious mind. The Magician is an aspect of your conscious mind. The Hierophant is your higher self. The Lover symbolizes the union between the masculine and feminine conscious mind and between the conscious and the subconscious. It's a particular state of consciousness. And the Chariot means the amalgamation of all, you've completed the process. So these are various configurations in which your mind can be. So if your mind is the mind of the enlightened, or the self-realized, or whatever, at whatever level you're working this, if it's spiritually, it's enlightened. If it's in the physical world, then it's self-realized, accomplished, then you're here. Now, the second set, the 9th letter all the way to the 15th, right? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, are the 7 laws of consciousness. What does it mean, the 7 laws of consciousness? The 7 laws of consciousness are the laws of the metaphysical reality that are working on our consciousness at any given time. There are 7 of those. Let's look at them. They're symbolized by 7 letters. As you can see, it's not the same as the other 7 letters. The letter Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech. These are the letters, the 8th to the 15th, but they're not the same as the 7 double letters. So it's a different combination of 7, because Hebrew is 3-dimensional in its teachings. And you can see there's these 7 laws: the law of suggestion, the law of response, the law of cycles, the law of equilibrium, the law of reversal, the law of dissolution, the law of verification. Now, we talked about the law of equilibrium last week a little bit. We had part 1. We'll come back to part 2 sometime. I think I even mentioned the law of cycles. And there's other laws. But today, we're not talking about the other laws. We're talking about a different law that's called the law of sexual polarity. That's kind of how we're going to wrap everything up. Now, what is the law of sexual polarity? It's a different law of metaphysics that is not represented by these Hebrew letters. And there's a reason for that. We'll get to that in a second. Let's first finish tarot. The last 7 in tarot are essentially the 7 steps. So we talked about these being the laws of consciousness. These last 7 are the 7 steps through which a human goes through essentially the 7 steps of enlightenment or of self-realization. Think of this as not necessarily a linear process, but a cycle. We do the whole thing again and again and again, both in the micro, but then in the macro, as the person evolves, it starts with the devil. The devil is essentially the unawakened person. The person who is focusing on the desire out of a place of non-awakening, right? And so, but each card symbolizes also the highest state of consciousness as well. So the devil is also that desire that we follow as our northern star, the will and the desire. And so these all, I'm not going to go through them right now, but they all symbolize stages in our evolution that are happening again and again and again and again in the micro, but also as a macro in our life. So for example, the lightning struck tower is the dissolution, the ego dissolution. And we go through a particular death. And then there's a star, then there's the moon, and then there's the sun. Which is, of course, 3 phases. And then there is something called judgment and something called the world. So as you can see, there's a particular relationship here between the cards. And a very interesting tarot reading that is done is by starting with a particular card. So for example, if I told you, Kelly, look at the 7 dichotomies. And I'll come back to them later. I'll put a little blue thing so that we can see them. Look at the 7 dichotomies and tell me which one is the one that is bothering you. Which one is the one you want to go next to. What I'll do is I'll choose the tarot card that represents it. Right? So for example, I'll do it for me. I'll say, let's say, governing versus not governing. I want to create a particular system in my life, a particular system with which I can disseminate this information. It's a form of governing. It's a form of having power. Well, let's talk about richness and poorness, money. And that's something that I must bring in if I want to make this operation big. So it's represented by the letter Gimel. So I'll start there. The letter Gimel is this one. And then what I do, the tarot reading will be is to read this way. So I say, so that means the state of consciousness that I'm looking for is I have to dive into the collective consciousness, which means I need to do something with the outside world. I need to think about the way whatever I'm doing is impacting other people. in terms of the laws of consciousness, the law I need to pay attention to if I want to flip that switch will be the law of response, which I'm not going to go into right now, but it means something to me, so I'm going to chew on that. And then the tower. Some kind of ego has to be dissolved. Something has to die within me for me to actually have richness. Okay? So, if you tell me, Kelly, which one of the switches you want to work on, you want to get next in order to feel like you've beat the system, you tell me and I'll do that reading for you. I'll speak a little bit about these things and we'll see what law of the laws of consciousness will come to mind. So that's tarot. Tarot is the same wisdom as represented through occultism. Occultism was the tradition that carried the tarot wisdom forward, calling it the Hebrew wisdom. And eventually there was a team of people who has sort of tried to redo it again in modern times, and they were called Arthur Waite and something else Rider, and they created the Rider-Waite tarot deck. But even if you go backwards, if you want to learn the original tarot, to go back to the Law of One, Book 4, which is not very digestible, but that's where it is. So it's a system of archetypes that show us the Hebrew letters from a different perspective. Now that's the minor arcana. What is the major arcana? The major arcana are permutation that was added later in order to make the whole thing a game and to expand the knowledge that within. And it's not something I have much knowledge about, so I won't talk too much. But when it comes to the archetypal foundation, it's only the 22 major arcana cards. They symbolize the map of human consciousness, its evolution, and its progress, and the laws that operate on it. So, I wanted to give you just another look at the 7 opposites so that you can find it easily in this Marco Polo stream and be able to evaluate for yourself, where are your switches, where are you on, where are you off. So there's ignorant and wisdom, and we said that's, you feel like you are a wise person, either intellectually or streetwise, or do you feel like you feel like you're ignorant and in some areas and there's things you have to learn? Where do you feel that switch is? Are you rich versus poor, either physically, financially, but also from an inner perspective? Do you have seed in the world? Have you created something? Could also be offsprings, literally. Life and death. Do you feel alive? And what does life mean to you? Do you have a sense of purpose? Governing. Do you feel that you're governing your own life, or are you always being governed? Are you always working for someone else, or is that from choice or inability? Who's leading your life? And also in the environment, are you a contributing member of society in the sense that you are, in the higher scheme of things, that to be an extremely influential person, someone who has reached a particular level of self-realization, and not everybody is interesting. Some people are governing in their own family. That's another form of governing. So with each and every one of these, remember it's 3-dimensional. Then there's war versus peace. And where do you live in your life? Like, who do you not have peace with? Because not having peace in some area means that there's a piece in you that is not in peace. And sometimes we're not ready to make peace, but it's yet again a piece of the puzzle, so to speak. And then beauty versus ugliness. If there's a part of you that does not like the way you look, then it's just the way it is. And beauty is not just a physical thing, but it's also the inner beauty that just emanates from us. And so that's that. So, what is the law of sexual polarity? And how does that relate to everything that we were saying? And I want to close today's lesson with this. The law of sexual polarity states, it's a law of metaphysics that is not one of the laws that operate on our consciousness, but rather a law that dictates how the metaphysical world works. The law of sexual polarity indicates that everything is a manifestation of a masculine and feminine energy. Everything is divided into 2, like Russian Matryoshka doll. You open, and it opens, and it opens, and it opens. Now, how does that relate to today's topic? Kelly, you specifically, we spoke about systems of personality and dichotomies. What we're talking about here is we're not talking about a system of personality. And astrology is not a system of personality, it's a system of consciousness. It's only the commoditized astrology that became a system of personality. That sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, right? Because it's rooted in truth, but it's been skewed. So what is a system of personality? The idea is that everything is divided into two. And you told me something very interesting, Kelly. You said, I don't believe in dichotomies in that sense of personality. To divide people into two kinds, it's too generic. And you're absolutely right. Until you have a pattern. When you have a pattern, it's possible. Okay? Because when we don't have a pattern, there's only chaos. So what's the pattern here? The idea is that we all either polarize to the masculine side of the mind or to the feminine side of the mind. And I'm pointing to the left and the right here in this particular occasion, but for some people the hemispheres are reversed. So, the polarity indicates something. If we polarize to the masculine in our mind, our body is feminine, polarized to the feminine. If we polarize to the feminine in our mind, the body is masculine. That has nothing to do with gender. We're talking about something more intuitive. If someone's more masculine or feminine. Okay? Now why does that matter? Because in general it tells us that there's two kinds of people. People who are polarized to the masculine and therefore feminine in the body, like geeks. That's why geeks are usually meek. Right? But also people who are feminine in their body, in their mind, and super masculine in their body. Like people who are not very intellectual but tough motherfuckers. Right? And so again, it's a standard distribution. Remember what a standard distribution looks like, right? Like, oh, can I draw it here? I think I can. Right? That's standard distribution. There's the middle. So it doesn't mean that everybody is, either or. There's people who are super to extreme, and there's people who are really in the middle that it's very hard for us to really understand. I'm not really sure if that drawing I did will stay in video. We'll have to check that. It stayed on video. So, what is the law of sexual polarity? The law of sexual polarity tells you that everything can be divided into a masculine and feminine. Everything. Just like we have, for example, in the laws of metaphysics, we have the 7 dichotomies. Right? That's a masculine and feminine. Just like what we have in the essence of man, we have desire and will. That's a masculine and feminine. Just like we have men and women. Just like we have the electrons and the protons in the atom. Right? Just like in elemental, we have fire and water always fighting. There's that always third element, that invisible element like air, that decides who's going to win. If there's more air, fire wins. If there's less air, water wins. But air also moves water, right? And so, same in the atom, we have the neutron, who doesn't impact the electrons and the proton, but is very essential piece of the puzzle. And so the idea is that everything is in threes, because everything is in dichotomies. 2 that compete to control, and a third one. Where is that in your psyche? We're all 2 people. Masculine mind and feminine body. Feminine mind and masculine body. We switch between these 2 personalities on a regular basis. Depends on the person that we're meeting. Some people almost never switch. Some people switch all the time. We call them bipolars. Okay? But we're all 2 personalities. We don't want to split our awareness of these 2 personalities, but we all know it. We all behave. Sometimes we walk into a room and there's this one motherfucking person that always makes us feel weird, and we can't quite find what we're saying, and we feel awkward, and it's just not it. We don't feel ourselves. Why? Our polarity has flipped. Right? And so this idea behind dichotomies works all the time, but it also creates the confusion around who we are and how we behave. Do you track time? Well, yes, no, I do, but sometimes depends on the polarity, right? We're all everything. But there is a system, there is a structure. And so if everything is divided to 2, specifically Kelly, then we have two types of personalities. People who are polarized to the masculine. I always talk about the mental polarization, if I don't mention it. But mentally polarized to the masculine or polarized to the feminine, which means that the body polarity will be the opposite. But you can divide each one into two. And so really you have four people. So if we draw that same standard distribution, then we can say, oh, there's the midline, but there's also the typical and the typical, right? And so, can I switch a color? No? Really? No colors? That kind of sucks. Whoops. How do you close this? And now I lost the thing. So you have four. So let's draw that as a sphere, because this little thing is really a circle if you cut and flip it. So we can divide it into two, but then divide it into two again. So you have people that are masculine in the mind and feminine in the body. People are feminine in the body, masculine in the mind. People who are masculine in the mind and feminine in the body, but more in the body than in the mind. And people who are feminine in the mind and masculine in the body, but are really more in their body than in their mind, so they feel more masculine than feminine. So even for the people here, some people feel more feminine, some people feel more masculine. And even the people here, on this X, some people feel more masculine, some people feel more feminine. There you go, 4 types of people. Now you can break it again, then you get 8. You can break it again, then you get 16. You can break it again, then you get 32. And this is why Carl Jung had a system of personality that was made out of 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And then that's why Myers-Briggs, which is built on Carl Jung's system of personality, has the 32 types. Okay, the combination of all 4s with all other 4s. 16, then 32. The Enneagram has 8. The 9th, the number 9, includes them all. He's the malleable one that moves between them. Astrology is 12, but that's not a system of personality. That's a system of states of consciousness that shows how consciousness were in the time you were born. And your starting origin place. We're all born in one place on the planet. So what does that have to do with the 7 dichotomies? What does that have to do with beating the system? The idea is to remember that there is a system behind the personality, behind the psyche, behind us as human beings, behind our consciousness. There is a system. And that system always starts from a polarity, because of the law of sexual polarity. And so we must look for the dichotomy between the masculine and the feminine everywhere. Everywhere. In our relationship, there's usually one who waits and usually one that's being waited on. That's a dichotomy. Why? How do we connect it with the mental polarity? Usually one is more artistic, one is more autistic. Usually one is more, let me do things. I don't want to stop. And one is more, let me chill. The polarities are everywhere. Usually one person tracks time and the other person doesn't track time, so they never appear when you want them to do the plumbing. We're all different, but there is a structure. And slowly and steadily we will learn here. We will start from the beginning how to detect these type of people based on their polarity. If their shoulders are like this, pointing forward, the top of the shoulder is pointing forward, you know they're suffering from anxiety. You already know their mental polarity. Masculine, body feminine, submissive. If their shoulders are like this, for somebody who suffers from anxiety, this is painful. The muscles are not used to it. You already know different mental polarity, masculine body. There is a system. And it's not that you can beat the system, but you can understand it. And it has to do with ancient Hebrew wisdom that gives us this structure of the psyche. Now, beyond finding this polarity, the focus here is to understand which one of the 7 opposites, The seven opposites. The seven opposites you're unhappy with. And once we know that, we can start. Because we all have desire. We all have will. Because this is the dichotomy at the essence that is driving towards movement, towards doing. So what is your desire, Kelly? Anybody else, if you want to tell me where your switches are off, give me one switch. Choose the switch that bothers you the most. Give me just one. And we'll do the tarot thing. We'll speak about it. So we spoke about what tarot is. It's the Hebrew wisdom depicted graphically in many, many different ways over the years. Originated in Egypt. It corresponds to the 22 Hebrew letters. We spoke about the structure of the Hebrew alphabet a little bit. The 3, the 7, the 12. We spoke about astrology a little bit, how it relates to that. And we spoke about the law of sexual polarity that governs everything that exists. Because everything is a dichotomy. All energy, Carl Jung said that, all energy is a dynamic tension between two opposites. It's true in our consciousness as well. Your reality is an amalgamation of these two personalities, of the masculine mind and the feminine mind, which a good one to talk about as well. And so, it was a little bit of a messy lesson, because I'm feeling a little messy today, but I appreciate you sticking with it, and I enjoyed this week's reflection. Which one of the 7 dichotomies that we have shown, the 7 opposites, is bothering you the most? What is driving you? What do you want? And let's talk about it. And then, where do you see the law of sexual polarity in your life? Interesting dynamic tension between two opposites that you're wondering about from a metaphysical perspective. Now, I will give you a tip. How do we find it? Such an abstract question. Oh, let me look for the polarity. What do we ground it in? Use the elements. Remember the 3 mother letters. Aleph, Mem, Shin. Aleph is fire, is air. Aleph is you, it's the full. You breathe. Without breathing, there is no life. So the full breathes. He's the air. Mem and Shin are water and fire. This will be fire, this will be water. Fire is always the masculine, water is always the feminine. So when you're looking for these dichotomies in the world, in life, in your relationship, who's the fiery? Who's the watery? When does it flip? In your job. In everything there is fiery and watery. There is feminine and masculine. In everything, in every object, in every moment. Art, the objective beauty of art is the perfection of the balance between the masculine and feminine. You go watch art that is completely abstract, you're being bored. It's like, nothing. There has to be some kind of a structure, some kind of a story, a narrative of sort. It could be very abstract, but I love how these lines combine with, it has to work. It has to be a picture, masculine. So look for the fire and the water in everything. In the body, it's the mind is fiery, the body is watery. Body is mostly made out of water. And so if you're more in your head, you're more fiery in the head. Fire, water. Water, fire. Reflection on that, and any questions, let's open this up. And if you want to introduce yourself, feel free. I'm not so good with the busybody stuff. One last thing I wanted to say before I sign off. You can already tell that to catch up, there's so much, he posted so much, I don't want to catch up because there's a story, there's a narrative, yes and no. Use this group by flipping and seeing things that you're interested in. Like little topics in the blue. Like for example, this week's reflection. Okay, I mentioned the 7 opposites, and maybe you scroll backwards, you see the 7 opposites, you click them. And then you see that, maybe you scroll back. Do it intuitively. Because like everything, there is the law of sexual polarity is here too. There's two ways to do something. Very structurally, linearly, let's say build it, we have to have a structure. Or very abstractly, very easygoing. I'm just gonna open and click. Google has that. I feel lucky instead of search, right? Let the intuition do its thing. I got a snippet of information in the right moment. The idea is to find your balance. So don't worry. You can always watch the whole thing at once after it's posted on YouTube. And every week, each episode, today is episode 2 of season 1, is posted on YouTube. It's going to be posted tomorrow. So worry not. Okay? Thank you so much. And I love you all. And tell me, what opposites do you want to pursue?